I want to welcome you in a timely fashion, each and all, to this Impact Collaborative. It's going to be a very powerful one. The talent in the room is stellar, and the talent in the panel is stellar. And we have many leaders and champions who have come through this world to teach us. And we have lots of impact that's going to come out of here. We thank you for your active participation today in this convening of experts. We're going to be doing some polling today, and this first poll is our first request for an exchange of information with you today. Please participate fully. These 90 minutes are going to fly because they're very rich. We are going to have exchange of information not only through the polls, but we will be giving you tools, our panelists and our staff. So please, you're going to need to actively capture some of that, so please do. Our experts are bringing tools that are going to help us, our community, thrive and to surpass challenges. Because you're here, bringing your own talents and your willingness to use them, you will be informed and ready to wield those tools to make positive collective impact. In attendance today, we have a strong representation of Women's Fund board members and engaged donors who lead with their committed financial support of women and girls, because women strong equals world strong. The sponsor of this Impact Collaborative, the Miami Dolphins Football Unites, are also working with us and other community partners on a soon-to-be-launched voting campaign. Stay tuned for some fabulous PSAs from committed Dolphins players. This campaign, many donors and sponsors made this possible. Can we take a moment to raise our voices loudly together and say that this campaign matters? Top leadership dealing with domestic violence here in our own Miami-Dade County, including Dr. Bello from this panel, Daryl Ambrosini, who spearheads the domestic violence from the state attorney's office, and also Judge Carol Kelly, both who are on this in our audience today, and along with leader of the Coordinated Victims Assistance Centers, Yvonne Mesa. We're here in May at another Impact Collaborative, telling us that calls on domestic violence were down in times of COVID. You all acted and we acted together, and this campaign went out with support of many individual donors, large and small, the Judge Amy Karen Fund, and Citrus Health Network. Now, at this week's last Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Council of Miami-Dade meeting that Carolina from the staff and I participated in, they shared that the demand for services has rebounded and sources are now, in fact, severely stretched. We must stay connected and communicating, and we are. It's very important for everyone to know that these feeders of intimate partner violence, domestic violence, have teams ready to help here in Miami-Dade. So again, law enforcement, courts, Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, they are all here open and ready and COVID prepared. Now, it's so important for our representatives, our elective officials, to be represented, and representatives of Senators Donna Shalala and Marco Rubio. We thank you so much for being here today in the audience, along with too many other leaders to mention. But I must thank educators, the Miami-Dade Commission for Women, law enforcement across many, many entities, and our colleagues from the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force and the State Attorney's Office for today's impressive turnout of #OneTeam. And now we thank our keynote speaker for her tremendous leadership and advocacy for children, the founder of Lauren's Kids and Florida Senator Lauren Book. Senator Book.
Good morning, and thank you all so very much for being with us today. My name is Senator Lauren Book, and I'm a member of the Statewide Council on Human Trafficking and an advocate for the prevention of sexual abuse and the exploitation of children. And today I want to talk with you about the horrific and pervasive issue that human trafficking is going on in every single community across the state, but especially right here in South Florida. Florida is a hotbed for human trafficking. In fact, we are the third highest trafficking destination in the country, with half of all victims being children. Human trafficking is the world's fastest growing criminal enterprise and is set to outpace drug trafficking. The problem is very real and it's growing fast. The truth is, faster than we can even keep up with. There has been some disinformation going around on social media, fear-mongering really about the masks and mask wearing, increasing a child's risk of being kidnapped and forced into human trafficking. And let me tell you, I have spoken with law enforcement and experts, and this information is not credible. Wear a mask, please. Beyond that, the idea that a stranger is going to come and kidnap your child from a grocery store parking lot or local park is rooted in a lack of understanding of the facts. Random kidnappings make up a very, very, very small percentage of trafficking cases and are classified as rare by law enforcement. In actuality, most children who become victims of sexual trafficking are groomed by someone that they know with false promises of love, safety, or opportunity. Some victims are trafficked by family members, recruited by peers, as we saw with the Jeffrey Epstein case, or Romeo pimps who pretend to have romantic interests before then tricking, trapping, and exploiting a young victim. Sometimes explicit photos or drug use are held over a victim's head by a trafficker in an effort to make the child or teen feel trapped and unable to access help. Immigration status can be a factor as well. Threat of deportation, exchange for housing. These are the kinds of vulnerabilities that traffickers exploit daily, oftentimes many times. It's also important to know that 1 in 5 children who touch a digital device will be sexually solicited online, regardless of their gender. As I just mentioned, sometimes a child or teen will develop a relationship with someone online, a friendship, or something more. Personal information is exchanged, maybe some photos are shared, and a child is left extremely vulnerable. And even online, some kind of relationship is formed prior to tricking, forcing, or coercing a child into being trafficked. There is good news here though. Traffickers can be identified and stopped, and kids can be kept safe. Last year, I sponsored a comprehensive anti-trafficking bill that is now Florida law. We created a direct support organization to provide funding and assistance for trafficking prevention and identification efforts, which greatly helped Florida to prepare to host 2 Super Bowl games, one that we've had and one that we're working towards, known hotspots for human trafficking. We created new regulations for massage establishments and the hospitality industry and increased training for licensed medical professionals to help spot the signs of trafficking. And we also created a pilot soliciting for prostitution database with information on pimps and johns soliciting for sex in an effort to curb demand. In the other part of my world, as a child advocate and the founder and CEO of the Lawrence Kids Foundation, we work to educate children and adults about ways to prevent and identify trafficking and exploitation. In our K-2 curriculum program, which is being used in classrooms across the state and actually across the country and the world, we have dedicated lessons to helping kids to avoid the traps traffickers often set and speak up if they need help. We also arm teachers and parents with the knowledge that they need to recognize and report the signs of exploitation. Thankfully, this kind of education is catching on. Beginning this year, the Florida State Board of Education is mandating developmentally appropriate human trafficking prevention lessons for elementary, middle, and high school students. Public school students right here in South Florida will be receiving knowledge to keep them safe from harm. And when it comes to combating human trafficking, knowledge certainly is power. I want to thank you for your attention to this issue. Human trafficking is clearly modern day slavery. Though I talked mainly about child exploitation this morning, people of all ages are victimized through force, coercion, or fraud for the financial gain of someone else. These evils are happening hidden in plain sight, and I urge you to learn more about the issue of human trafficking so you can do your own small part to solve this big problem. Thank you all so much for your attention, and I hope that you have an incredible day and learn a tremendous amount.
Thank you, Senator Book. So how this webinar is going to work, we're going to have 2 more polls going on. There's a lot to do, so thank you for your attention and participation. We also ask you to post your questions for our panelists in the Q&A segment here, and I'm going to get to as many of those questions as possible after our panelists present to us. Our dedicated, amazing staff, Carolina Garcia and Viviana Alvarado Pacheco, are busy working behind the scenes, and they're going to gather, when you post in the chat, up to 3 key issues that concern you most about this topic, and up to 3 solutions that you think might work. They can be complex, they could be simple, they could require collaboration, they could be individualistic. All suggestions are worthy. Please post these in the chat tab at your right. Our intern and our staff will gather these, and this information is gathered each Impact Collaborative, and it informs our work moving forward. We cannot emphasize enough how important this is. Thank you for that, for answering the tools and the short exit survey. We thank you in advance because all of these tools are needed and support your Women's Fund in our work. Now, as a segue to our brilliant panelists today, we share these quick August. Within the last week, these 3 news flashes have come. This is current, urgent, focus time. This is happening here and now. And we also want to share some upgrading of our information and awareness campaigns that have gone out. This powerful campaign started about 2 years ago, but it does allude to some of the things that we'll hear Sarah from It's a Penalty talk about. We'll hear Liam Neeson talk about it, that not everything is like taken, just like Senator Book mentioned. There are people who are kidnapped and taken and duct taped, but that is a relatively small percentage. So our survivor champions and leaders, experts, and community service providers have upgraded and given us information to campaigns now like these. It's not a fairy tale, and it's not always what you think human trafficking looks like. Now, we are going to ask our brilliant panelists to introduce themselves in a brief 2 minutes within context of today's topic. Sarah, will you please lead on?
Yes, hi everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to join this panel. So It's a Penalty. We run awareness raising campaigns during major global sporting events to educate about the issue and signs to look out for, and also we equip everyone with mechanisms by which they can report should they be a victim or suspect that they've seen something. And we encourage everyone to make a report to help end human trafficking. And we partner with some of the biggest names in sport. They front our campaign because it's not an easy subject to talk about, but somehow they make it a little bit more accessible. So they are the voice and the faces of our campaigns, depending on the major sporting event. We also seek to partner with sporting governing bodies and host committees. We work with airlines who show the short films that we make. We make a 30-second film before each major sporting event. And we work with ride shares and hotels. In the area of training, we produce materials, campaign materials, educating again about the issue. signs to look out for and ways that people can report. We work with law enforcers, and most importantly, we work with NGOs. And we were so honored to work with Women's Fund Miami-Dade during the Super Bowl in Miami earlier this year. We strongly believe in collaboration as well. And we also believe in contextualizing our messaging so that it's completely relevant to the hosting city, the hosting nation. On average, we reach about 180 million people per campaign. Like the Senator was saying, you know, when you raise awareness, you educate. And when you educate, it changes behavior. Knowledge is power. We've run it during 8 major sporting events, including the Football World Cups, Olympics and Paralympics, summer and winter, Super Bowls, Hong Kong Rugby Sevens. Yeah, we're planning to run it again in Tampa, the Super Bowl Tampa next year. The Euros, the finals and semi-finals in London next. Obviously, it's been postponed till next year because of COVID. Tokyo next year, Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. And you mentioned the Liam Neeson video that we've collaborated with Liam Neeson. He's very graciously agreed to make the short video with us, educating about what is human trafficking, because the more we travel around the world, the more aware we are that a lot of people don't understand what is human trafficking. And I think you might be showing the film later during the session.
Thank you, Sarah. Dr. Bello.
First of all, let me just say good morning, everyone. Sarah, I saw your website and I'm like, wow, so amazing, amazing work you're doing. Good morning, Mr. Walsh and Detective. Thank you for having me on. More to Life has been around for 15 years. I want to say that as a survivor of human trafficking, who went back to school and got my PhD, coming out of Hollywood as an actress, there was a ton of Me Too stuff happening there. And there were so many triggers that I hadn't dealt with. For many victims of human trafficking, we understand it More to Life that the high propensity don't tell. And to this day, no one will ever know the true story that I went through because it's too gruesome and too dark. But the healing process took years after I was rescued. And most victims try to put it behind them and press forward to do whatever it is, even if it's a negative action. But in Hollywood, it was a very difficult place to tame rebellion with the addictions that parlay and the collateral damage. So I went back to school. Last year, Department of Justice Victim Award, Lifetime Achievement Award from US presidents for our work, because we understand just the intensity and the need of what many that haven't survived it don't see. And so we partner as a Google Next Gen policy leader with many partners. We've created technology that I learned from there over the last 3 years by being a Google Next Gen leader. And so we're partnering with the creators of Call of Duty. We did our double-blind study last year in Miami in partnership with Catherine Fernandez-Rundo, who we have to thank for extraordinary fight against this major issue. And we want to congratulate her on being reelected. But virtuality, VI, creating environments and safe places for victims heal across the globe. We also created the first human trafficking sort of self-evaluation app that launches this fall that is global for victims all over the world, called Coming Home. So I want to tell people they can go to vreval.com or cominghome.app to learn more about this amazing technology that we've been working on for the past 2 years. More to Life is part of the Open Doors Outreach Network. So we operate in 7 counties, Miami-Dade, South Florida, Pinellas, Tampa, Sarasota. And to date, we've rescued over 6,000 victims of human trafficking in the United States, in places like the Philippines, Singapore, and around the world. We have curriculum that'll be public and made available. For only $99, you will get like all of our years of framework model just posted onto Amazon as a way to just let everybody know what we do and how we do. And then we are opening up a 5-acre tech human trafficking future of work ranch that trains victims of human trafficking, first from 18 to 24, and then from 15 to 17 in South Florida. We closed on the property as a part of the Archangel Foundation and More to Life in October. And so we're real excited to have a 20-bed facility on 5 acres that's an animal sanctuary as well. And I think that's probably my 2 minutes.
That's an amazing 2 minutes. Thank you. Callahan.
Good morning, everybody. Just want to say thank you to the Women's Fund Miami-Dade for having me, and thank you for the other panelists joining on. But want to say thank you mostly to those of you that are joining as participants, the viewers out there. Just by joining, you guys are already taking the first step in helping fight human trafficking worldwide. So thank you for joining. Thank you for taking the time to listen to some of these great topics and great information that's already been shared in this discussion. My name is Callahan Walsh. I am from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. My parents, John and Reve Walsh, co-founded the National Center after my brother Adam went missing in 1981 here in South Florida. Many of you may know my father from the television show America's Most Wanted. In fact, we have a show together called In Pursuit with John Walsh on Investigation Discovery, which hopefully will be back in the saddle filming season 3 when this whole COVID thing is over. Really looking forward to that, getting back on the road and hunting down some bad guys. But my day job is at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, an organization that's helped recover over 310,000 missing kids, but has been in the exploitation space for just as long. And we started to see at the National Center that we had case managers in our missing children's division who were looking for missing children, many runaways, and those same children were being looked at by our analysts on our exploited children's division and seeing that these children were being trafficked. And we started putting that together and realizing that many of these children were being groomed and lured from the home into the open arms of child predators. Now, that's not the case for every trafficking victim. All trafficking stories look different, but this is what we were seeing at the National Center, and trying to spot these trends and create resources around them, not only to help the issue in the moment, but also create prevention education to help prevent these things from happening in the future. So we've really put a great team together, been working diligently on this issue, and also working with other NGOs on the issue as well, and other tech partners. We understand we don't operate in a bubble. It's all about collaboration, sharing information, sharing the technologies, so that we can make sure that we battle this issue the best way that we can. So again, just want to thank you for having me on the panel, and I'll pass it right along.
To Detective Ulloa, thank you both very much. Let's see, Detective, let's make sure we have our tech okay. I'm not sure I hear you yet. Not hearing you yet, Detective.
Let's make sure the detective is allowed to speak.
No, we can't hear you, Detective. Okay, so please know that Detective.
One more try. We're in the background trying.
Okay. So I'll introduce him a little bit myself. Detective Michelle Ulloa is the special victims from the Special Victims Bureau of Internet Crimes, Sexual Crimes Against Children of our own Miami-Dade Police Department. And we are so grateful for your work. And you're also a wonderful speaker. So we'll keep on working on the tech on the backside, but we'll go now back to each of our other panelists and ask them to please talk about the key issues in about 3 minutes. Synthesize what you see as the key issues as regarding our Impact Collaborative topic today of human trafficking, cybersecurity, and COVID-19. Sarah.
Sarah, your mic.
Sorry, I'll start again. I think it's not only, you know, the challenges are not only educating about what is human trafficking, and I think the fact that, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to make this video with Liam Neeson, because you know, a lot of people will say, yes, I didn't really fully understand it, but I did watch the film Taken. And that's great, because Taken did raise awareness, and, you know, 10 years ago about human trafficking. However, for those of you who've watched the movie, you know, it's the story is about two young girls that were abducted when they were traveling around Europe and then trafficked into sexual exploitation. Of course, the vast majority are trafficked by people they know, and I know the senator touched on that, and I think that's what we really need to get across, is that it happens within your own communities and your own towns, and I think, you know, that's a really important element to an issue that we want to educate on, as well as the signs to look out for. You know, what are the signs to look out for? And then what if you suspect something, then call the hotline. And It's a Penalty have developed a map of the world, so wherever you are in the world, you can click on that part of the world and it'll come up with all different hotlines that you can dial, and mechanisms that you can dial. But I think, you know, the fact that it is the second largest criminal industry in the world, that, you know, it's the fastest growing illegal business globally. You know, it's in America, but it's all over the world. No country is exempt. No city is exempt. And that, you know, almost 25 million people are trafficked each year, and that 1 in 4 of those are under the age of 18. And I think so for me, the issue is really raising awareness. And I know today, compared to when we first started with It's a Penalty even 5 years ago, there is so much more awareness about it. And that's good. That is so important. And so, yeah, so for me, those are the main elements, I think, for It's a Penalty. We are in you know, we raise awareness, we educate, and we equip. And I do believe that cure is essential, but prevention is even better.
Thank you so much. Brooke.
Well, first I want to thank Ashton Kutcher for his work at Thorn, being a partner with them, and for the conference I did with him, and also for my uncle, actor John Voight, who came down to Florida to do a video to fight against this issue as well. I believe that my time at the Department of Justice earlier this year really indicated that the prosecutions for human trafficking perpetrators is down by about 44% in the United States. This happened after the precipitation of the issue of how victims are exploited online. But unfortunately, when Backpage was taken down, it left this gaping hole. And so what perpetrators are using now is other sites outside of the US that Sarah probably knows about, but that don't have a reciprocity to give us the intel to go after via visa and other modalities. They don't have to share that intelligence. And so with the Department of Justice funding, now they're sending some FBI and others to other countries, but they can only send so many. And so because of that, it's down about 44% in the US and about 40% globally. And so now all of these traffickers and perpetrators are using all these foreign sites to traffic our children and our millennials and our young people for sex, for labor as well. People need to understand that sex trafficking is a part of labor trafficking. And Florida, where we are, ranks the highest of farm labor trafficking in the US. And so we have to talk about labor trafficking more and the bridge between that and exploitation in terms of sex trafficking. We also have to look at the ideas of technology and how to use what we call #tech for good. Because of the precipitation of so many modalities coming out in the future that will exacerbate human trafficking and cause the sensations of certain perpetrators to be heightened, we need to teach young people prevention and what we call digital intelligence and integrity at a very high level. And then finally, when we think of the future of work, most individuals look at victims. There's this stigma to being a victim, regardless of your education, regardless of the type of family. You know, I didn't come from a poor family by any means, highly educated, but there's different types of poverty. There was emotional poverty in our household, Maria, and domestic violence in our home. We think that they get a job at Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A. Starbucks, we work with them too, but that's sort of it. They're out of harm's way. They have a minimum wage job and that's it. We need to cause people to realize in 10 years and 15 years, those survivors and the children of them, those jobs won't be around. So we have to be forward thinking about how we educate survivors, how we prepare them to code, how we train them, how we educate them, how we prepare them for jobs. And we have to sort of remove the stigma so they can integrate back into society and still feel pure and clean and wonderful. And I can tell you as a survivor, that is more than a notion. And there's so many other things we need to do, like partnering with Thorn, you know, partner with More to Life to sort of aggregate our case management system coming home and the app, our VR and AI solutions and other technology that so many amazing people are doing around the nation to find unique ways to go after and spot perpetrators and prevent victims.
So deeply appreciate your leadership. So much knowledge and wisdom can be accrued in just one Impact Collaborative, one session of listening to our leaders. Thank you so much. Callahan.
Well, I think what's most important is to understand the trends that we're seeing around trafficking, especially during this COVID time period. At the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we operate the Cyber Tip Line, which is a mandatory reporting mechanism for all internet service providers here in the United States to report any suspected child sexual abuse. So that's Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. They make reports to the National Center through our Cyber Tip Line of any time that they come across grooming, luring, online enticement, sextortion, sex trafficking, sex tourism, all these different types of ways that predators harm children online. And so because we're the reporting mechanism, we're able to spot these trends and understand some of the issues that we're facing right now. And in fact, during this COVID time, we have seen an uptick in our reports. In fact, in April alone, there was over 300% number of reports made in that month compared to the month the year before. Last year, our Cyber Tip Line received over 16.9 million reports. It's an astronomical number of reports that are coming in. But again, because we're positioned as a clearinghouse for these issues, we're able to spot these trends and not only help share that information back out with the nation, but also to create prevention education. So some of the things that we spotted during this time period were there were a few CSAM, that's child sexual abuse material videos, that went viral. And when people are seeing these on social media platforms, they may be well-intended, but a bit misguided when they share them to their friends and family or on their news feed. First off, it is illegal to do that. You're exploiting the child when that happens. And the proper thing to do is report it on that platform and report it to the National Center through our cyber line. Now, of course, during COVID, there's more screen time for children, more screen time for adults. So of course, this opens up even more opportunities for these children to be groomed and lured online. Child predators, we know, are also using the dark net to share information on best practices. We see the chatter. We see that they're talking about how this is a great time to exploit children. They're online more. Parents are stretched incredibly thin. So strike now, and they're sharing information and best practices, which is obviously very harmful. We've also seen a shift because of COVID in the way traffickers are trafficking their victims. Normally and traditionally, they were meeting for commercial sex. Well, because of the restrictions, either the exploiter or the buyers are more reluctant to meet for casual sex, meet in person. And so the traffickers have moved to more online platforms, subscription-based platforms, where they will sell the child sexual abuse material through those platforms as well. So understanding those trends, I think, is really what's important for us to move forward and help tackle this issue as a whole. So yeah, here's just some of the numbers that you can see an uptick in our cyber tip line reports. Overall, we've seen about a 93% increase from January, June in 2020 to compared to 2019. But as I said, in April alone, it was over 300%. We are starting to see the numbers come back to pre-COVID time period, but we'll see what happens with that. And obviously, we're not over. The COVID experience is still strong, and unfortunately, we're still seeing some of these reports, an increased number of these reports coming into the National Center.
Thank you, Callahan. Well, this very work that you just mentioned is very much what Detective Ulloa is doing here at our own Miami-Dade Police Department. Because security is so tight at the police department, we're glad that's working. We're sad that he's unable to connect with us via the audio because of all the firewalls and the security at the police department. But Detective, we are going to ask you to do some posting for us in the chat about your biggest concerns and your solutions, and also your calls to action. So we ask for that interchange to continue on, and we thank you so very, very much for your work. Because now we're going to talk about solutions.
Maria, couldn't you have the detective just call in so we could hear audio from him? No?
We did try that initially when he got on earlier, and we've been trying since early, but good idea, but it didn't work. It's okay.
Since we're not able to hear him, can I brag about some of the great work that we do in partnership with these ICACs? Okay, because the ICACs are fantastic. They're the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. We work with them regularly in the cyber tip line. So what happens is that reporting mechanism, as I was talking about, we get reports from the public, from survivors, from parents, but mostly from the tech industry. They come to the National Center. We analyze those reports. Of course, we triage them as well. We've had even takedowns within 15 minutes of a report coming in. In fact, one in Southern California that we had recently, the tip came into the center. We added value. We were able to pinpoint where that image was taken. Within 15 minutes, law enforcement arrived at that individual's doorstep. They arrested that person and rescued 5 other children from that house. And that's all because of the great work of these ICACs. They are the task force that go out there and make the arrests. They're the one that go knock down the doors. We provide them with the information. We add value to these reports. But they're the ones who take on and deal with the hard work. I mean, they're the ones boots on the ground. They're the front lines, recovering these children and putting the bad guys behind bars. So unfortunately, we can't hear them, but the work that we do down there and the Special Victims Bureau and Internet Crimes Against Children down there in Miami-Dade is second to none. So I can attest to the great work that they do down there for sure.
It's together. It's the #OneTeam. And we're not supposed to be scared because that will paralyze us. We need to be prepared. We see the stats. That's why stats and research are important. We see that there are professionals behind the scenes ready to act. And if the regular community is not prepared to feel empowered to act, and that means each and every one of us here on this Impact Collaborative today, and those of you who will be sharing the recording a couple of days from now with your vast networks, that is what's going to tip. That's what's going to make all the difference of all these people working together. So now we're going to talk about solutions. And please, everyone who's in the audience, take notes, take screenshots. We know that this will be recorded for later, but act now and grab this information because it will cross your path and you're going to be ready to do something about it. Sarah.
Yes, so the solutions that It's a Penalty does is during major sporting events, research shows that if someone sees the same information 7 times, they'll remember it. So as I said earlier, we work with some of the biggest names in sport relevant to that major sporting event. And we produce a short 30-second film. And that's, for those of you who'd like to see some of our films, sorry, could we go back to the original slide? Thank you. For those of you who would like to see some of the films, the 30-second films we've made, you just go to our website, itsapenalty.org, and scroll down on the homepage, and you can see the films. But they raise awareness about the issue and they educate about penalties for offenders. And that is the extraterritorial legislation, which is provisions in law for countries to prosecute their citizens for the abuse of children if it takes place abroad. So in other words, if an offender has paid for sex with a child under the age of 18, they can be prosecuted not only in let's say the United States, but when they get back home. And as we know through research, that fear is the biggest deterrent. So we educate about penalties for offenders through the film, and we educate about mechanisms. You know, if you see something, this is what you need to do. So that film is shown on airlines. We work with some of the biggest airlines in the world, and they will show that film in flight for between a month to 3 months, depending on the length of the major sporting event. And that will be shown not only on airlines flying into the hosting city and hosting country, but all over the world. So once it's uploaded in flight, it'll be shown all over the world, reaching millions of people. Then the next point of contact, sorry, you're going to have to go back to that slide. The next point of contact is the airport. So as people arrive, they'll see them, they'll be educated on the airlines. Then at the airport, again, they'll be educated again. So the film will be shown on the screens. And as you can see in Miami, we had this static image that was at the airport, at Miami Airport. The next point of contact is ride shares, and we work with Uber together with the Women's Fund Miami-Dade, and we helped with they trained their drivers. They had three days where their drivers were educated about how to spot human trafficking, and we produced rear view hang tags that they could put in their car, educating about the hotlines. And the great thing is there's legacy there, because even after the major sporting event, those drivers are trained to spot human trafficking, and that rear view hang tag can remain in the taxi. We then work with hotels, some of the biggest hotel chains in the world, including the Hilton. We will help with the training prior to that major sporting event to help them spot human trafficking, their management and their staff from all their hotels, not only in the hosting city, but in the surrounding cities as well. And again, we will produce, as you can see from this picture, we will produce campaign materials in different languages where needed, educating about the signs to look after. You can see the faces also of some of our ambassadors on those materials, and they will be given to guests that we put in the rooms. The film, again, will be 30-second film, will be also shown in the lobbies and in the hotel rooms where possible. And then stadiums, the film will be shown in stadiums. We'll have presence in stadiums. I haven't quite cracked that with the Super Bowl yet, but during the Olympics and Paralympics and the Commonwealth Games, they will also show the film on the giant screens inside the parks. And then of course, social media and media. Next slide. Yes, so on average, we will reach about 180 million people. And together with our partners, we've helped protect almost 17,000 victims. And like I said, prevention is better than cure. And this is the film we made with Liam Neeson.
Hi, I'm Liam Neeson. Human trafficking is the fastest growing illegal global business, generating $150 billion each year. It is the second largest criminal industry in the world. Almost 25 million people are trafficked each year, and 1 in 4 victims are under the age of 18. Most of us would imagine that human trafficking involves someone moved across borders and exploited by strangers. This can be the case, but most people are trafficked within their own countries and cities and coerced into exploitation, often by people they know. During high-profile events and major sporting events, with the influx of hundreds and thousands of people into the hosting cities, exploitation can increase. People are trafficked for forced labor and sexual exploitation, regardless of age, background, or location. Traffickers may threaten their victims with violence or blackmail, take advantage of their vulnerability, or promise an opportunity for a better life in order to control them. Here are some of the signs to look out for. Victims may be easily startled, agitated, or afraid, unsure of where they are or lack official ID, unable to explain injuries or possessions, may have strange markings, brandings, tattoos, have unexplained hotel use, be accompanied by a suspicious companion. Children can be dressed up to look older than they are. If you're watching this and you are being exploited, or you think you have seen something, then say something. Join our campaign. Together we can end exploitation and human trafficking. Thank you.
Yes, so as you can see, it was a big collaboration, including NICMEC, who are one of our partners. And again, I believe it really is by coming together that we can have a bigger impact. Can I just encourage those who want to know more to go to knowthesignsnow.org. You can see that film again, you can share it. It's already been seen by over 1 million people across the internet when we launched it 3 weeks ago. It's also going to be shown, the shorter version is going to be shown on 4 airlines from the 1st of October, as well as the Hilton Hotels and the Miami Airport are going to be showing that film as well. On knowthesignsnow.org, you can educate yourself about the signs to look out for, and you can also click on make a report, and it'll go to that map of the world that I told you about earlier. And wherever you are in the world, you can click on that city and it'll come up with all mechanisms by which you can make a report. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Brooke.
Well, I'll make sure to have a PowerPoint presented next time. It's been incredibly busy lately. I want to say that during the Super Bowl, More to Life partnered with Athletes for Action, and during the Bart Starr Awards, so it's one of the only 6 or so NFL sanctioned events in Miami-Dade, and we partnered with the state's attorney's office, Catherine Fernandez-Rondo, and the Advocate Program. One of our programs is called Live Until You Die. In the sting operations during the Super Bowl, so you have thousands of people at a breakfast. You had Clark Hunt, who is the owner of the Chiefs, along with a ton of great NFL players. And you have that week and that next day, a sting operations. Through the partnership with the Advocate Program and the Human Trafficking Council at Catherine Fernandez-Rondo's office, we worked with 60 victims. These are girls who people sort of miss because they stated that they desired to be there, so they got a prostitution charge. Almost all of these young women were 18 to 24 years old, some from Argentina, from Venezuela, from other states. And so normally when we have a charge like that, they have to pay for the course. And then as they admit they've been victimized and we teach and train them, we take the money they've paid, give it back to them, and do services, sort of transport them out of the area, send them back home, give them a ton of other resources, anti-human trafficking resources and healing resources. We waived all of our fees, and out of the group of the 60 young women, about 50% were admitted victims of human trafficking, whose traffickers actually dropped them off. And so one of the amazing solutions is when you come across those that state they desire to be there and they get a prostitution charge during a major sporting event or other event or conference, it's important that law enforcement understands to partner with agencies and advocacy agencies and organizations in order to provide service for those that still think they are a prostituted person when they're really pimp controlled and trafficked at a high level. Another extraordinary solution that we've been doing for 5 years, we have one of the only court-appointed courses for buyers in Florida. And now through the district attorney's office and others, we're taking on, and we have right now 100% in 4 years, no recidivism. So no one who's taken our course has gone back to jail for that crime. Now we're getting traffickers post jail. And so by the end of this year and next year, traffickers who have done prison stints will have to go through our course. We have found that the legacy of fatherhood, that reaching men and buyers is an extraordinary process in prevention of human trafficking. And about 28%, Mara and panel, were violated sexually or physically in an extraordinary way when they were young boys. And so that's been such an incredible solution when we think of prevention and also when we think of prostitution and the parallel between that and human trafficking, because they're both a commercial sex act. Finally, I think that we have to understand the uptick in how we sort of mitigate the issue of familial sex trafficking and the uptick in sort of youth pedophilia. The calls we get of a mother saying, if my 11 or 12-year-old boy is fondling his little brother or sister, is that just child's play or what is that? Some parents really don't understand the process. And once he's taking pictures of her and he's doing other things of him, whatever it is, it can actually take a state or federal charge of human trafficking because it's a minor. This child is a minor. And that boy who's 11 or that girl who's 11 or 12, typically it's boys at this point in terms of violating, but there's some girls, can be on the sex offender registry. And so I think one of the solutions is much more campaigns and the aggregation of knowledge for parents and parents in foster care.
That's amazing. We actually have in our audience today the lead representative of the PTAs of our area. So we ask her to please disseminate that information. And as we've all gathered more than once as one team and many times talking about these issues, it doesn't get old, it gets newer. And it is so important that that new information that you're feeding us, Brooke, and every panelist here, give us what we need to create the change. So we
let me say to see about the buyers program, you can go to rjede.com, rjede.com to learn about it. And it's buyers, solicitors of sex, and then now traffickers as well to just get more information.
I see the way. Makes so much sense. Thank you so much. Callahan.
The three solutions for me is training, prevention, education, and funding. Training, I think, is just so important, and that's from everybody from the average citizen to law enforcement to healthcare providers. As Sarah mentioned before, the majority of our sex trafficking victims are trafficked by somebody that they know. In fact, some of our victims sleep in their own bed at night. And that's so shocking for some people to hear. They think, there's so many misconceptions around trafficking. Kids are getting hit over the head and drug into a van and taken off and never seen from again and trafficked. And that's a very unlikely and very rare scenario. So I think the training is just so important for people to understand really what trafficking looks like, the signs of trafficking, which I think that was great with Liam Neeson's video describing what those signs are. I think that's so important for the public to see stuff like that. So I think training is just so important. And it's for law enforcement as well, because we've seen law enforcement completely change the way they deal with trafficking victims over the years. In fact, we've trained over 350,000 law enforcement professionals at the National Center. We have some great training programs through NCMEC Connect, which is our online platform. So training, I think, is just second to none. Of course, prevention education is huge too. We want to make sure that these children don't become exploited in the first place, and creating a powerful and engaging and empowering education is just so important. Making sure that children are understanding it and are remembering these lessons as well. So we created a program at the National Center called NetSmarts. It deals with a lot of these situations. We try to empower kids to make safe and smart decisions online, to navigate those waters safely. It's important for parents to understand those dangers as well too. And parents are as much a part of the prevention education as anything. Lastly, I think funding is just so important. It's something we don't talk about enough, but these resources don't grow on trees, and the funding needs to be there for the prevention education, the training, but also for the survivors as well. Once they are brought home, the road to recovery can be long and lasting and can be resource intensive. And so creating, funding avenues, especially for local care providers that are providing this long-term care to these survivors, and make sure that they're not just survivors, but they're thrivers as well, I think is just so important for the general public to know. So please, if there's a charity of your choice, maybe one on this panel here today, even that you feel strongly about, whether it's national like our organization or local, it's just so important to also fund those organizations. Most of us are NGOs, we're nonprofits. That's what we have to do, is go out and fundraise. Oftentimes fundraising is a dirty word, but I'll bring it up, and because it's the reality of the situation. So training, prevention, education, and funding for our survivors.
Much appreciated, much appreciated. Thank you so much, Callahan. Detective Oya is posting in the chat. Please make sure, see the resources there. You can see that many people in our audience are desirous of speaking with you, Detective. And we thank you so much for the exchanges that are going on here. We're going to move on now to sort of to refocus what happens next. Please use that chat tool, not only to correspond with Detective Ulloa, but also to please, audience, put your concerns and up to 3 potential solutions, because we archive those and we use them. This is dynamic. Please, please share. And some people are posting questions in the Q&A, and please do that. I will grab some from the chat as well, but if you see that I don't ask your question, please repost in the Q&A. And we ask you to participate in this poll as we go as well. It's very important that we stay connected, and you're going to have the opportunity here to have your information shared with some of our panelists and our speakers from today, and look for other ways that you can continue to collaborate. It's very, very important to us. Callahan mentioned fundraising. That's really important. Research is also really important in communication. As we gathered here earlier, we were all chatting, Sarah, Callahan, and others, about incredible achievements of people that we know have been impacted and have been able to get out of trafficking quickly because of the collaboration of all of us. Callahan mentioned some. We've had 2 recent Miami-Dade and Florida situations where 2 people were being trafficked, reached out through the One Team and through the Women's Fund, and to many of our other collaborators, and both of those people are in safety now. It doesn't have to take a long time. If we act quickly, we can change things quickly. So we are going to be talking about we're going to be putting your questions and answers now. And I'm going to start asking the panel all together. Whoever wants, please raise your hand, except for your Detective Oyoa. You can answer in the chat. How common is it for young boys to be trafficked versus young ladies? Who'd like to start? Brooke.
So we partner with United States Institute Against Human Trafficking in Tampa and provide all the mentoring services for them. And the former CEO was Geoff Rogers, who did the film that I was in and so many others called Eyes Wide Open, or Blind Eyes Open. And the key funder, one of the key funders, is former manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Kevin Malone. And their whole ideology and process is about boy victims. And so typically, a lot of the national data is saying upwards of about 30% of human trafficking victims are currently boys. And the heightened idea of girls never telling, because human trafficking, as people know, is something that's happening since the dawn of America and before. But clinicians, professionals, first responders really didn't start to recognize it fully until about 15 years ago, what it was, right? And so 15, 20 years ago. And so currently in their home, there are 4 boys of human trafficking, even as young as 10 years old, and they only take 5, and they've been able to stay full. And so typically about 85% of girls have never told, or they're beginning to tell more, and even a higher percentage of boys. And I want to say a lot of the young men coming out of juvenile detention, or even those that are coming out of incarceration, 18, 19, 20, were trafficked in the United States criminal justice system. So if you're a young man going to jail for whatever, you will be trafficked in prison, you will be raped, and you will be sold. There'll be something that's exchanging value for you to save your life. And so it does happen. And finally, like I said, in our RJED program, about 28% were violated as young boys, but about 15% it was actually for sex or a sex act. And so I'm excited about the new data, because the more we can reach young men sooner, the more we can stop some of the precipitation and mitigate the issues later in their lives.
Amazing. Callahan, would you like to address that same question?
Absolutely. we see obviously both genders being trafficked, a bit more on the female side and on the girl side, but we absolutely are seeing boys trafficked, especially boys that identify in the LGBTQ+ community can be susceptible to trafficking, oftentimes because of issues in their home. If their parents are not in agreement with their lifestyle, these children often run. We see a great majority of these children as runaways. And we know 1 in 6 runaways reported to the National Center is likely a sex trafficking victim. So it's just important to understand, because these children who are, whether it's because they identify in the LGBT community or not, when they're running away from home, they oftentimes will not have the same support system that other children will have. And so they're, again, even more susceptible. They're out there on the streets. They don't have mom and dad back at home, either sending them money or trying to get them back. They don't have that support group. And so they are more reliant on these exploiters to be able to afford things like food and clothing and shelter. And so they can become more susceptible in certain cases. It's not every case, but that is often what we see here at the National Center as well.
Thank you, Callahan. Sarah, do you want to add anything on the international front?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I mean, I think sometimes, the general thinking is that, especially for sexual exploitation, that it's girls, and like Callahan was saying, the majority probably are, but boys are definitely vulnerable, and we see it. So it's really, really important that parents are aware also, and caregivers are aware that boys are vulnerable. And I know it's been said, but I just think that what's so important is that children feel that there is an adult that they can trust, that they can talk to, especially through COVID-19, where so many more children are online. It's being aware that they are vulnerable, and that it's so much better that parents and caregivers actually talk to the children, boys and girls, about about the vulnerability and about what could happen and how to avoid it, and that children feel that they have got an adult they can trust, that they can talk to.
Let me just add really quick, Callahan, I wanted to thank you. So on the NetSmarts website, so we've partnered with NCMEC for a really long time. Mm-hmm. Back when Holly was there, Eliza Ria is a really good friend of mine, and we love everything that you all do. There's some videos in NetSmarts of boys, dramatization of actual stories of boys that have been victims that share their story, and those stories are connected often to what we're talking about today, cybersecurity. And so just to give you a little shout out, you should go to netsmart.org and look at some of the videos of boys that have been trafficked via online connection with someone they thought was a friend playing a video game, and it was a trafficker.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bello.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We've heard all of you speak about how violence and abuse begets violence and abuse. So breaking chains. Often an abuser has been abused, and often somebody who's being quote unquote victimized is not envisioning themselves or identifying that way, from what we've learned from you all in the past. So that all ties in together with all that you've all been saying. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to read a question. Good morning. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've worked with a 16-year-old who is in adult court and foster care at the same time, based upon the same events. I found that the message to the client that she was a victim for purposes of foster care, but a bad criminal in the case of adult court. What is the purpose of this dual track? I cannot understand it and want to help design a better route for the human trafficking victim to heal and learn. How can a victim get referred to the new sanctuary?
I can. So this is an issue in the United States. And so there has to be education via law enforcement, what there is, and a connection to prosecuting attorneys who work for the state, and then the judge. And typically a diversion program will be set in place for the youth, because when a prosecutor for the state looks at a crime, they're not necessarily looking at the underlying issues, because systemically and historically, criminals often have underlying issues. The difference is, in the United States, the human trafficking is one of those things on TVPA that's a crime that has been unmitigated because those victims never were treated. And so the court has to rethink how they're looking at the underlying issues of why those crimes of that youth were done. And so if she or he is a minor, they need to figure out how to divert the criminal charge and assist that youth in going into the TVP or a state-sanctioned sanctuary as a victim of human trafficking, and allow them to grow through that with wraparound services. We cannot keep charging victims of human trafficking that are minors with a crime when a lot of the precipitation of that comes from them being violated and hurt and made to do criminal acts. And then the unmitigated trauma and stress and anger, we become who we see as human beings, and they just don't even know any better.
It's amazing to me that a child can be young enough where they cannot consent to sex, yet they can be charged for it. I mean, that's backwards, right? It doesn't make sense. And I think, the trainings that we're talking about with law enforcement really help drive changing mentality and legislature around it as well, too. Just to talk about some of the foster care issues that we see at the National Center. So we're also the nation's mandatory reporting mechanism for children missing from care. So those are children missing from the care of the state foster kids. Stat I mentioned before, 1 in 6 of our runaways is likely a sex trafficking victim. We know 80% of those sex trafficking victims are out of the care of the state. These children don't have the support system. They don't have the support network. And during COVID specifically, they are running away from that foster home. The foster parents are sometimes reluctant to take that child back. Or if they're in a group home, that group home is reluctant to take that child back out of fear of spreading COVID to the other children there. So you really have to understand this is a serious issue within our foster care population. It's an issue that we really just become aware of it in the last couple of years since we become the mandatory reporting mechanism. In the past, it varied county by county how a child from the care of the state was reported when they went missing. Sometimes it was reported to law enforcement. Sometimes it just went into a file and went into a filing cabinet. And so now that we have this reporting mechanism, we're able to crunch these numbers and really add value to these other organizations and provide them with the information. So I just wanted to dive in on that because the foster care system is right with this type of abuse and this type of exploitation.
The foster care system, which is so amazing, but it has not been, the systematic structure of it has not been changed for decades. And so as Callahan was saying, not to speak against it because we need it and it's wonderful, but it really is time to look at some of the systematic protocols and shift them, because we do know that about 60 to 70% of people who are victims of trafficking come out of the foster care system, and they were never identified sometimes until they crimed. And I think that's significant to understand. And so there also has to be a deeper and weighted training for those who desire to be foster parents and guardians. I know Citrus Health does that, but we need to have that nationwide.
That's exactly what I was about to mention is Citrus Health. Thank you so much, Dr. Bello. And we have amazing advocates from Citrus Health who are in our audience today, and we asked them to share some of their information. There's a cutting edge program here for foster care, and that's another need that we have is for people who care and feel capable to participate as foster parents specifically for a youth who have been victims of trafficking or have been trafficked. And that's a very special training. It's a very special skill set and a very special need, and the training is there. So if a person is open who is listening here or knows somebody in their networks, we can connect you to Citrus Health and to their amazing program. And hopefully we will lead, as you say, Dr. Bello, to the increment of other programs like that one.
It's called the Chances Program.
Okay. Exactly. Fantastic. Sarah, did you want to Anybody else want to answer anything more, or I'll go on to the next question. One of our folks is asking to hear a little bit more about other kinds of human trafficking, like labor trafficking. We've heard a lot about sex trafficking, which is fascinating. Can somebody speak a little bit more to labor trafficking as well?
I'm currently working with Global Centurion as an expert consultant for HHS at the federal level. And Laura Lederer brought me on with HHS to design a training for the 5,000, almost 5,000 Title X clinics around the country. And that's because of, you know, a lot of victims going there for abortion. But a lot of labor trafficking victims go to the clinics too for different STDs or small sort of wounds and things of that nature. I think, as I said earlier, labor trafficking is the #1 type of trafficking in the world. Sex trafficking is next to that. I know that last year we worked on, with Florida Dream Center, St. Pete Police Department, Vero Beach Sheriff's and Police Department, the National Sting, which was sort of a hodgepodge of a combination of human trafficking and labor trafficking in the Japanese massage parlors. And we were able to relocate 2 victims out of Florida back home. But I think people have to understand that you have labor trafficking, you have sex trafficking, you have domestic servitude, which we have worked with many victims in Florida related to that. You have organ and donor trafficking, which there's an uptick in some different parts of the world. Don't like to talk about it because it's just bizarre, but it's a true thing. And once again, the type of labor trafficking is farm trafficking, construction trafficking, which is mostly men, is the heightened sense, or the heightened type of labor trafficking in the world. I don't know if you have some other numbers, Callahan or Sarah.
So, you know, at the National Center, we focus mostly on the sex trafficking side of things, specifically with children. What we do come across is its ties to labor trafficking, especially in the migrant community. And so when families are brought over here to the United States, the parents are put to work, and then sometimes the children are put to work in other ways in sex trafficking. And these, because they are migrant families, and they're you know, their legal status here in the U.S. That question. These traffickers will use those as tools to manipulate the parents and the children, saying, well, you know, you go to law enforcement and we'll take your kids away. And so it's a serious tool that we'll use to gain compliance from the parents and from the children as well. And that's what's so important to know. If there are migrant workers out there, if a crime has been committed and they come forward, there are no penalties against them. I think we see that with domestic violence as well, where we have migrant women who are more reluctant to come forward, thinking that, oh, if I tell law enforcement that we're having a domestic violence issue in the house, then I'll be sent back to wherever they came from as well. And that's not the case. And so it's just so important to report these instances and to come forward. So that's what we see at the National Center, this tie between the labor trafficking and the sex trafficking of minors in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, with It's a Penalty, our focus during major sporting events is mostly sex trafficking. Although if you, you know, the statistics that I talked about earlier, they include labor. A majority of children that are trafficked for sexual exploitation, unfortunately. But if you go to the itsapenalty.org website, it will also give you signs to look out for labor trafficking, as well as mechanisms by which you can report if you suspect that you, again, have seen labor trafficking, human trafficking. And one thing I do want to add, actually, is that there isn't a global age of consent for sex. It varies from country to country. And I think that's an issue. I really do. I think there should be a global age. Having said that, no child is going to put themselves up for prostitution. No child is going to say, yes, I want to be sold for sex. I want it's just, they don't. So that, for me, I know I'm tapping a little bit on the subject we discussed earlier, but I do believe that there needs to be a global age of consent.
Sarah, that's a really good point, and you're touching like my heart chakra right now. I've been saying that, and it even state to state, there's an issue with prosecutions and understanding for law enforcement because of that. And so that is the next global campaign that needs to happen, has to relate to that somehow. One of them.
Emma Turner asks, I'm a university student. What do you think that college-age kids can do to have the most impact in the fight against human trafficking?
I think one of the things, we have a curriculum called SOSU that is being used currently by 4,000 college, university students in the Virgin Islands. And because one individual on a college campus is raped, sometimes that rape or the misunderstanding of consent has led to human trafficking. For example, there have been particular parties in the last few years where someone was sort of pushed and forced to have sex with someone under the influence. And there was sort of, not necessarily a bottom girl, if you want to, but another college student who had a little ring going, who was selling to other students in order to pay tuition. And so we have to understand that there are traffickers out there that are manipulating and teaching and training, and then some students that are kind of doing it on their own. We had 2 cases here in Florida. One was in Sarasota County and one was in the Naples area, Collier County. And so one thing you could do is go to sosuniversity.com and look at our curriculum. We give that free to college students. So you can, log on to the course once you contact us and learn about prevention and safety zones on campus. There's a bunch of apps that assist college students when they're on campus and about 5 miles away from campus, and some things to do to keep yourself safe. And then probably our website and obviously Sarah's website, It's a Penalty. The basic red flags and the basic prevention methods for human trafficking, even at the NCMEC site, are what millennials and college students should be aware of as well. And also I want to say this, your college president's office, the dean, and also the security office, mostly because of the Sexual Violence Campus Safety Act of 2014, has some information on sexual violence on campus and human trafficking. So I would start on your campus as well.
Yes. Sarah?
Yeah, no, I would just agree with that. And I would say, you know what? Become an advocate. And by that, what is an advocate? An advocate is somebody who speaks up, who communicates. So become a young advocate, become an ambassador in your university, create a team and educate, become educated, do your training, but then actually think of creative ways by which you can educate your campus, your university, about what is human trafficking, because you're going to be a change maker. You just are. And not only that, you're going to raise up other change makers. And I really see the younger generation really want to make a difference socially. And you could start that in your university.
And if you're local, Emma, we work all the time. We spend lots of time at FIU, University of Miami. Barry University has an amazing program, St. Thomas. I'm not going to keep on mentioning that we have close collaborations, and you're very welcome to volunteer with us. And we have lots of great connections for you. So please feel free to reach out to the staff. I'm going to go quickly now through a lot of questions because the time is flying. Dr. Bello, what was the name of the film that you mentioned, please?
Blind Eyes Open. It was in theaters last year, but if you YouTube it, you can see a lot of the clips from it. I think you can get a copy of it now too on Amazon, I think. Blind Eyes Open.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And another question from, for those in tech like myself, I'm a UX designer. What are some ways that we can contribute our skills, for example, to More to Life's tech?
Well, we're actually in conversations with a company called SAS that's going to possibly offer through some friends of ours, sort of this data for good project where they'll assist in aggregating in a grant that we're doing with University of South Florida. And I think that if you are experienced in tech, we're going to need people at the new ranch. And we're going to be teaching coding. We're going to be teaching digital integrity, intelligence, and prevention. We're going to be training survivors, and we're going to be doing 2 boot camps a year for high-risk youth for prevention. And so please just get in touch with us. You know, our website, I don't think I said that, is More to Life, MORETOOLIFE.org. And we can talk.
Awesome. Another question. The QAnon conspiracy theories are gaining traction on social media, have generated a lot of attention for the plight of sexually exploited and trafficked children, but such posts may be accompanied by misinformation about who and what is involved. What are the impacts of this increased awareness and accompanying misinformation on the broader cause of preventing human trafficking? I'd like to take that one. Callahan?
I can start off, yeah, and I recommend that my panelists join in as well, but we do see that quite a bit at the National Center, specifically lately around the sex trafficking issue. A lot more people are interested in this right now, more than ever before. And while there is some great information out there, I have seen quite a bit of misinformation. Now, I think the silver lining is that people are talking about the issue, and that at least they're not all in agreement that it should be something that's legal or it should be something that's happening. Everybody wants to see it stamped out. Everybody wants to see it go away. They want to fight against it. But it's really important to really focus in on the facts and to make sure that what you're talking about online is factual, it's backed up with research and information. Reach out to these organizations, go to their websites, learn the information gathering that they're putting together, because there is some great resources out there. I think the silver lining is great that people are interested in it. We at the National Center have seen a dramatic uptick in visits to our website and in the downloading of our periodicals and our information, that our stats and things like that. So I think it's a good thing ultimately, but there is a lot of misinformation, and that needs to be ironed out. And I think that can be done by talks like this. I think we have people that may be in the chat and maybe in participating here today that were a little misguided and maybe had some incorrect information. But this is where we have open discourse and we talk about these things, and we can educate and inform folks on what we're really seeing and the numbers and the facts that are really happening with sobered opinions.
I'm going to answer 2 of the questions quickly. Are the billboards being done in different languages? Yes, when the Women's Fund Miami-Dade collaborates with many other of our community partners in doing the awareness campaigns, we do them in English and in Spanish and in Creole, which are the biggest languages that we have here. And we're always open to work with any other community who would like to do adaptations of our awareness materials. And we do work together. We have an expertise in creating this messaging, so we can come together. Some people do direct services. We can do this messaging. We can fund together, and these awareness campaigns can just get bigger and stronger. And also to another college student, what events could we have on college campus that would bring about attention to this issue? Once again, the Women's Fund Miami-Dade are very happy to liaise with some of your panelists here and other community partners to help you do amazing events at your campuses. We have many contacts with amazing speakers. There are great resources, some of the films that have been mentioned here, many of the resources on the websites of the panelists. And please do feel free to reach out to us, and our staff will post how you can do that. And we also have a lot of the information there on our website that you can use. So please do be in touch if you're here locally. There's a question from actually one of our board members, Deanne Connolly Graham, an amazing board member. Isn't the fear of deportation more real with our current federal administration, and how does that, of course, affect this topic?
Not really, because of TV says a human trafficking victim, when proven, is protected. And that's the importance of working with experienced advocates. We have never seen a human trafficking victim deported, even in the process of investigation before proven. because of T visas. And so it's important to work with advocates who work with attorneys who specialize in someone not being deported. So that's not really an issue. We really need for victims to be unafraid because a heightened sense, as Callahan said earlier, of migrant workers are victims. And so we need them to be able to come forward.
And I'm going to squeeze one last question in here. One of our One Team members thanks us for this powerful conversation. Thanks you all. I'd like to ask, how can we help change local laws so that they can best benefit survivors?
Contact your local representative, write them, send them a good old-fashioned letter.
You have Senator Cook, who spoke earlier via video. Go to her office, have a conversation with her and the local legislative leaders in your area who have to open their door to you and listen to your emails and take your phone calls, and tell them what you want, and go in educated, go in understanding what the laws are and what they should be.
Fantastic. It's interesting as we all keep communicated. It's interesting, we find things that come up in these forums, for example, that the by-hour motels are legal in Miami-Dade County, although in the city of Miami, they're not. Maybe there are things that we can do to change the legislation there. It makes a big difference how the different responses are for your different law enforcement departments. There's so many things we can do. And one of them is keep communicated, keep on collaborating together. And then the issues that come up, we can together work to address them locally. This is absolutely amazing. We're going to go on maybe to our last poll of the day, but don't leave us yet. Please know that we have tools here that each of our panelists has given us. On our website, we have the ongoing iterations of what you should know, statistics about not only trafficking, but also intimate partner and domestic violence. Just in case somebody is not paying attention and they don't think that this is an issue, well, it is. These are the facts of what you need to know, but most importantly, it's what you can do. This information is not only in physical flyers if you need them. That's one of the things that you all university students can do. Contact us and we'll make sure and get you flyers, but these are also available digitally. It's a Penalty has amazing resources about knowing the signs, and Women's Fund Miami-Dade has very similar cohesive messaging also about know the signs, and it's shareable digitally. So Viviana, if you can show us just a little collage of what we have. Those are each individual postcards in the 3 languages somebody asked before, in English, Creole, and Spanish, and each of those can be shared on Instagram or on Twitter, so we can keep on educating one another. In addition to the poll, we will have an exit survey, and information is power. So please do the exit survey. Your quotes are gold. We will use them. We need them, and we thank you. Please make sure that every single person that you know who's eligible to vote registers to vote by October 5th. We make a lot of assumptions in life, and one assumption is that people feel empowered to vote. We need to make sure that that is true. The League of Women Voters is working very closely with us. We have an amazing campaign that we're going to reveal soon, an awareness campaign for getting out the vote from the Women's Fund in collaboration with many partners, including the Dolphins and others. So please stay tuned for that. And once again, we have to remember that this Women's Fund Miami-Dade is based on 4 pillars. When women are strong, the world is strong. So it's freedom from violence, like today's panel. It's about leadership, health and well-being. And the other pillar that we base ourselves on is a very important one, which has also come up many times today, economic mobility. So we gather the first Thursday of every month to talk about issues specifically with a gender lens, because when we bring equality together, gender equality, racial equality, all types of equality, it makes for a stronger and brighter society. So please join us next month for the Impact Collaborative on equal pay in the post-COVID-19 economy. We can rejig and we can make things better. So we thank everybody for being here. We will see you on October 1st. Panelists, thank you so very, very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Stay strong, stay well.
Thank you.